berries.
It's not the easiest wood to carve.
You've been out here 5 minutes, that's pretty good.
No.
Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So we do have a garden update for you today, finally. I'm sorry it's a little bit late, but before we head out to the garden and the greenhouse and check on that, I need to be putting some of this mushroom spore right here in this bag inside this bucket, so in a couple weeks we can have some beautiful lion's mane mushrooms coming out of these little holes here. So I am brand new, like brand spanking new to growing mushrooms. So I am not an authority in exactly how this should be done. This is more showing you my journey and the process. I've seen people grow mushrooms before in several different ways, and a lot of it seems really intimidating because it seems like you have to have everything super sterile. From what I understand, you should be clean, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve sterility, and it can be a lot simpler than you see a lot of the time. In this bucket here, I have some aspen, pure aspen shavings that I added super hot tap water to last night. Put the lid on and let it just kind of sit. In theory, this is going to help pasteurize it. In the very least, it's going to help the wood chips soak up some moisture. See, they smell lovely. So one of the reasons you don't want to use pine shavings, to my understanding, is that they're too acidic. You apparently can if you add some lime. That was a little bit too many extra steps for my brain, so I went ahead and bought the aspen bedding. There are many holes that are drilled into this, to include some on the bottom. So I've put about 1.5 inches, maybe even less, maybe it's about 1 inch of bedding in the bottom of the bucket here. It is damp but not soaked. And I believe this is called grain spore right here. Lion's mane grain spore. So we're just going to be kind of crumbling that up in this layer, and then basically making a mushroom lasagna. A little bit of aspen bedding and a little bit of spore. So both buckets that I prepared have now been filled with the aspen and then the mushroom spawn, all layered in there. And I have this much left. It's actually quite a lot left out of just one of the lion's mane bags. So this is gonna go a really long way. From what I understand, I could grow some more lion's mane mushrooms out of this bag specifically. They just might be a little bit smaller than mushroom grown in the buckets because these have something to feed on while these do not. At least it's not as much to feed on. Some of the other mushrooms that I have, and I started just a few days ago, are right here. These are all oyster mushrooms. These ones are green oyster, and then these are pink oyster mushrooms. I did notice that one of these looks like it might be starting to fruit out the side, so I opened up a little slit there. So to be determined on how well this works out. Our shed here is heated. I've got the heater running to about 60 degrees, so the mushrooms should do well growing in here for their full life cycle. Ooh. That looks really nice. You're gonna put black in there, you said?
I think so. That's what she wants to do. We'll see once it stains, because I can always paint after the fact.
Okay. Oh, garden. Darn it, I was gonna see if Levi could cut a hole in this for me so that we could maybe try to make a birdhouse out of this one, but there's a crack in it. See that? And this one doesn't feel dry enough. The insides aren't moving around yet. So, no, they just get greener as you move on. So darn it. Maybe we'll pull one out of the greenhouse when we go up there and he can cut a small hole in one of those. We gotta have a resolution to this birdhouse gourd situation. Here lies the garden, may she rest in peace. Just kidding, she's not completely dead. But a lot of the greens that are in here, I am not entirely sure what has stricken them, but they are very limp and sad. In true Kentucky form, our weather has been warm and then freezing cold, and then warm and then freezing cold, and that is what we do, and cool loving plants really can't tolerate that. And so I think that's what we're seeing here. We're just seeing a reaction to less than stable temperatures, as well as plants can have a very bad reaction to lots of wind, just like sucks the moisture out of them. So I have just all but determined this to be completely done. I know I'm going to be able to get a few little piddly greens here and there, but I'm really not counting on this for a lot of sustenance. I'm gonna leave these things in just to see what they do. At least over here, we did have what I think is a rabbit come in and taste a few of our goodies. See here, something has come down and eaten the tops of these plants. There are a few radishes in here though. Look at that. Some of those mushrooms that were sent to me are called wine cap mushrooms, and they're apparently very good at breaking down manure and, you know, just garden refuse. They break it down pretty quickly and they make those nutrients more bioavailable to the plants. So I'd really like to get some of those going in the garden. I've been told that even though it's going to be cold coming up here soon, that all that's going to do is slow down the progression of the mycelium taking over inside the beds. It's not going to necessarily kill it. I am thinking about dedicating this bed to mushrooms though during the growing season. I have this elderberry tree which looks, you know, winterized at this point in time, but it does shade this bed pretty well. So I think that this is going to be a good spot for those mushrooms as far as established beds go. And I can always put over some kind of shade cloth to protect them as well. On the back side of the garden, it looks pretty crazy. This is all asparagus that I have yet to take care of. You can see that the wind has impacted the look of it quite dramatically. So we've got asparagus here, this over here is bee balm, this nice tall stuff. All of this has to be cut down. Just been busy, so I haven't done it. And it's not necessarily a big deal that it be done now. I have let beds like this go until about like March, like go time for them to start coming back and putting on their spears. And so that's not necessarily ideal, but it's not a deal breaker if you wait kind of extra long on these. We'll get to them soon though, sometime in January. See the crazy amounts of berries here. I have yet to see a wayward asparagus plant in the garden, but I imagine it won't be long because they're gonna make their way into many places. The long-term goal for this particular garden, the raised bed garden, is a perennial space. I'd really like this to be relatively hands-off. It might not happen this coming season, though I do have plans to put in some muscadines, which are like wild grapes, and some more raspberries. Hopefully we're going to be doing that in this space over here. During the growing season, this was the kids' garden. It's a little bit too big for them to manage. As you can see, it's pretty wild and crazy. Not that my garden necessarily looks any better, so it's not their fault. I gave them a pretty big space to try to manage, and it got out of hand, as it does with a lot of gardeners, including myself. But I'm really hoping to reclaim this space and make it more of like a perennial type space. I do have these thornless blackberries that I'm going to need to tame pretty soon. All of the branches that had fruit on them this past season, I will trim out just to make space for newer branches this spring. I keep calling them branches. The technical term is cane. Blackberries fruit on their second year canes. And so any cane that doesn't have leftover berry trusses is probably going to be the cane that fruits this coming season. So obviously I don't want to take those out. This cane actually already looks pretty much dead, but you can see the remnants of where the berries were here. This is what I would remove. Those are the canes that will need removing, but truthfully a lot of these look like they are first year canes, so they grew during this last season. So next season will be their second year and they'll all be fruiting, which is super exciting. As I was walking through here, I noticed that we have some volunteers. This is volunteer borage. I think maybe I did know it was frost tolerant, but if I didn't know before, I know now. I have a feeling it's not going to be lasting very much longer though. Tuesday morning, I think the morning that this is gonna post, our low is 19, and that's low, super low for a lot of things. Even frost tolerant things definitely struggle when you start getting into the teens. Oh, come here, man. have this rosemary plant that I have in a pot because I'm very good at killing rosemary plants by leaving them out in the winter. Supposedly rosemary is good at overwintering. I always manage to kill it over winter, so I like to move it into the greenhouse. It does need repotting. I don't think this is the time of year for that, so I'm just gonna move her on over to the greenhouse and see if we can get her through. She's been a wee bit neglected underneath that trellis over there where the blackberries are, and I did have some cucamelons growing over there this past summer. I was a little bit hesitant to take this plant out from underneath all that foliage when I first noticed that it was probably needing quite a bit more sun, because I didn't want it to get burned. If you just take a plant out of a shady situation and thrust it into much more sun, it can be problematic. So I decided to leave it. It's gonna be fine. Burr, it's cold, Mochi. How you doing? Nefarious, how are you? Handsome as ever. This is a good spot. You sit right there. It's actually gotten a lot colder throughout the day today. Must be that cold 19 degrees blowing its way in. The greenhouse is nice and cozy though. This side of the greenhouse I have dubbed the living side. And by contrast, this is the dead side. Although we do have a row here that is living. It's just a little bit further behind than over here. Got some nice Brussels sprouts barely starting to peek in down here in the leaf nodes of the plants. You see that one there? Quite a few more over here. So excited. The cauliflower is looking exceptionally full, and it would not surprise me if we start seeing little heads peeking through probably in the next few weeks. I am not great at growing broccoli, though I do try, but it looks like we may have success with some of this fall, which is very exciting. Broccoli plants can be pretty sensitive to the heat, and I can't remember what variety I planted this time, but I may have planted a heat-tolerant variety, so that would have been smart. I may have done that. But I think at this point in the year, we are pretty well past any sort of heat risk for these plants, and we might actually get some heads. So across the street from the broccoli is the pea trellis, and you can see we've got lots of flowers coming on the pea trellis and some peas. Now this weird almost modeling type texture I think is from them seeing a little bit of frost, but they're still living and doing very well. True to form, the fall peas are moving slower than the spring peas. That's because they don't have as much sunlight available to them, and they don't have as much high temperature. Now, they don't necessarily need a super high temperature, but you know, days in the 70s, peas really do like that, and we're not really seeing that too much lately. But that's all right. They're here and they're doing things. This here is another frost-tolerant flower, and this is a calendula. I've got a few of those down here. See, there's one right there. A lot of what you see here are weeds, although some of them were intentionally planted as a ground cover. This here is Sweet Alyssum. These will get bigger and cover a little bit more ground and have some more flowers eventually. They are in the Brassica family, which I think is so cool. They're so tiny and delicate and very pretty. All right, let's check in on the rutabagas and the carrots, shall we? I think we're not too far from a harvest on these. It's a little bit hard to put you down in here and show you, but we've got a pretty sizable bulb right there. It's about 3 inches across. Look at that carrot. Let's pull this one. We have to, for science. It's short. Oh, that's so funny. That is so funny. So usually you can gauge if the carrot is ready to pull by the width at the top, by this diameter, and you can kind of guess how long the carrot is going to be by that. But this is the first planting of this particular bed, and the compost layer may be pretty well condensed down. Underneath the compost is some hay. And then it just gets more and more drainage after that. There's mulch and then there's logs underneath in this bed. So the issue that we may be having here is there's just not a lot of substrate in order to support a longer root. With this particular bed, that's going to get better with time. I know there's about 8 inches of settling that has happened already in here. And so we just have to keep adding more and more compost to the top. And eventually there will be a thick enough growing medium where our carrots will not be stubby. Thicker rutabaga as well. The rutabagas pretty much form like at the surface level, and so they're not as affected by that. I was trying to see if I could find another one that looked somewhat ready, but just in a different area of the bed, and see if those were any different. I know that I have different types of carrots planted. The front is one variety, the back is another variety. I don't remember which varieties. Oh yeah, see. Fat at the top, skinny at the bottom. We're gonna give these some more time. This row here houses our red cabbage, which is looking fuller and fuller every week. I did plug in a few random seedlings that I had in some of the pots. That there is a Brussels sprout. And then I've got different things. This here appears to be a broccoli, cauliflower. I didn't label things. It is quite common for me to not label things and to forget. Let's pick one of these. These are pretty delicate. See? Can you see what's happening here? I don't know if we're going to have, that one's a little more firm. That one might work, but I don't know if we're going to have as successful of a birdhouse gourd year as I thought we were going to have based on the fact that we harvested so many. They're just not curing as well as I hoped. Either the rodents are getting to them or the walls of the gourd themselves are just much thinner than I thought they were going to be. They're not holding up to too much abuse. So I don't know, should we do it? Should we cut a hole in it? Yeah, that helps us see really how thin it is. Oh, yeah. See, it's thinner than I
About
really...
a 1/16 of an inch, yeah.
Yeah, and see, I was able to snap that pretty easily. I know that you're supposed to, like, put something on the outside of these to help kind of protect them from the elements, but still I expected them to be more substantial to begin with. Like, super hard.
No.
No.
Apparently not.
The seeds look mature on the inside. See, they look weird.
Start growing along the corner.
You know what's gonna go in there?
Well,
a wasp.
Probably.
There's gonna be a wasp nest in here. Wow. See it? Thank you.
Welcome.
Not bad. Now, there's probably no bird that's going to want to wedge themselves in there to try to make a nest. So as I mentioned, this is probably going to be purely decorative. We might poke a little perch sticking out right here. And then, as I mentioned, we need to do some kind of buffing or curing of the outside. I think I'd rather eat these. You can eat birdhouse gourd, and they're very, very delicious when they are smaller, so. We are actually very nearly in the season where I need to be starting all of the spring seeds. So not necessarily the tomatoes and the peppers, but definitely more in the brassica family. More broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages, kales. So I've got all of that in my brain, and I plan to put much more over here in the coming weeks. Hopefully some kale starts. It's just something that I need to find the time to do. When it comes to planting this space next year, I need to be mindful that whatever I do put over here needs to be able to come out of these rows by the 1st of April. And that's not always possible with some of the like heading type things like broccoli and like cabbage, because for me, usually those take until about the end of May, early June before we're getting a sizable head out of that. And in that time, I could have had things like tomatoes and peppers in their place. And as far as this greenhouse goes, by that time, it's going to be way too hot in here for those kinds of things. And so I'm thinking that I may plug in some kale over here, get what I can out of it, and then we'll pull it when it comes time to put in things like peppers. Excuse me, small child. Can I help you? Are you trying to escape? We can hear you. Keep going, baby. Maybe it'll work someday. You're a punk. You're a punk, but I love you.